It was just about 7-8 miles outside of the Wood-Tick-Chick State Park boundaries. If we had an EPIRB and hit that thing, we're 16 to 32 hours away from any kind of Coast Guard help. So when we swung open the door, I had the spotlight and I had the shotgun over my arm. As soon as we panned over there was 3 sets of eye shine that were like fence post markers. As I'm talking, my cousin was standing there next to me, and all of a sudden, in a flash, he's under that card table, right? We could see he was looking across at that other window. And now this window, 18 inches tall, 24 inches wide. But when we turned and looked, this thing was looking down at my cousin, and we only saw from the bottom of the nose to the top of the eyebrows of this thing in that 18-inch space.
But particularly the sensations and feelings that come with that. You hearing something around you?
Yeah. My name is Fred Roehl. I'm from Bristol Bay, Alaska, Dillingham. I'm a Chug Young Tribal Council member, and it was just one of those things. When you're born into it, you don't realize the depth of the history and the culture. It's something that's kind of taken for granted in your younger years, So I've learned, through life experience exactly how blessed I am to come from such a culture. And coming up, I was born in 1975, and some of my earliest memories are that of my aunties and uncles and grandma and stuff warning us about don't whistle in the woods, don't ever go following whistles. And if you hear kids laughing in the woods, you got to make sure it's one of your cousins, or otherwise you don't follow, because the hairy man will steal you and eat you. And when you grow up in that kind of environment, when you hear about it every day, you kind of, until you see it yourself, it's kind of like, I was a savvy little kid, so I always assumed that they're pulling our leg to keep us out of the woods kind of thing, until 1983 when I was skipped away from the crowd. My Aunt Lucy was watching us because we weren't quite old enough to go to fish camp and, pull our own weight yet, but I was sneaking away to work on my tree fort, and I was about maybe 150 yards from the house, and where my grandma lived at the time was towards the end of the runway in Dillingham there on the Squaw Creek side. And so I'm walking along and I'm staring kind of down at my feet, plotting on what I'm going to do to my treehouse, because I was using an old fish brailer kind of thing, just kid shit, right? So as I'm going along, my attention was drawn to there was a stand of alders that I had to pass through that was part of the trail. And I saw what I thought was my Uncle Leo at first, because he was 6 foot something. He was a really tall guy. So I was like, oh, shit, I'm in trouble kind of feeling. And then I realized, wait a minute, this thing is taller than those willows that were about 2 foot tall. It's much taller than my uncle. This thing it was just a dark silhouette at about 70 yards, started swaying back and forth. And I'm just staring at it. And then it screamed at me, and I was gone. And everyone else heard the scream. So when I came tearing back, I kind of got into trouble for going away from the crowd. But it became real that day. And then that fall, we were at Moose Camp, which we would take a 32-foot fishing boat up the Nuyuk River, and that would be our kind of a cabin away from home. We'd just anchor out in the river and use a skiff and go hunt moose. And anyway, we're on our way back, and I got stuck at Black Point. It's a tidal zone on the Nuyuk River near the mouth, and we got stuck right there near Angel Bay on gravel, and so we had to wait for the tide, and it was a few hours out. And so one of my older cousins was going to take us younger kids out sport fishing with rod and reel to kind of keep us out of the adults' hair, because my dad and my uncles were there, and they were contemplating whether or not the boat would list and tip over when the tide stuff, just adult stuff that we really didn't need to be a part of. So we jump in the skiff, and as we're backing away from that fishing, all of a sudden we hear screaming and yelling, and we heard splashing, but we weren't putting anything together at the time because we're just dumb kids, talking amongst each other. But they're waving us back to the boat and yelling. So we pull back up, and immediately we're getting yanked off the skiff and forced inside. And right inside the wheelhouse of this Rawson fishing boat, we heard the first scream. And so we looked up on the bluff, and it was 65 yards across, about the same height off the where the river, level was. And there was a big dark silhouette up there and just screaming. We were inside the boat at that distance, and it was still ear piercing. We're like, whoa. And we started hearing Harry Man, and the splashing of rocks. This thing was throwing rocks at the fishing boat. And that's when things got real, because one of the rocks busted through. We had an A-frame set up with tarp over it to hang the moose quarters. And one of the rocks busted through that tarp and knocked one of the moose quarters off of that little A-frame we had set up in the stern of the boat. And that's when they sent us all down underneath, down below in the sleeping area with no windows. And gunshots were just going off. You would hear screams, you would hear rocks hitting the boat, and then you'd hear more gunshots. And that's when the danger became real, but it was always at a distance. It was never up close and personal. And, over the course of time, years, we would have encounters at a distance. They up until 2006, I would say, they scream, they make a fuss, you just leave, you're good, you're golden. Until, like I said, 2006. So the preparation for that trip actually started in 2004. My uncle and my cousin, we were like three peas in a pod. If there's ever adventure to be had, it was us three were at the core of it, if not the only ones. And my uncle wanted to go gold panning way up by where the proposed Pebble Mine is on the Nuyuk River, which is 248 river miles from Dillingham. And so 2004 is when it was brought up, but it took 2 seasons for him to accumulate a portable sluice and all this other easy to pack stuff for gold mining. Basically, he wanted to check it out and potentially set a claim. So when it came to 2006, he was finally ready. And we left Dillingham on September 13th, 2006. It was the day after my birthday. And it took us till the 17th to get up there because my uncle, he was in his 60s at the time. He's since passed, but we made a couple pit stops, in Studio and Clinic on the way up. And so we get to this particular place on the Nuyuk River. It was just about 7-8 miles outside of the Wood-Tikchik State Park boundaries, coming downriver on the Nuyuk. And the Nuyuk is the largest tributary to the Nushagak River by volume, right? So, talk about remote. I mean, if we had an E-perb and hit that thing, we're 16 to 32 hours away from any kind of Coast Guard help. I mean, it's out there. And so we get there a couple hours before it gets dark. In September, at that time of year, it's roughly 12-12 light cycle, 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of darkness, roughly, And so when we first get there, me and my cousin, we were just worker bees for my uncle. So, when you're helping an elder, you carry the load and you respect your elder. And he just, he started making us some salmon chowder. And we just unloaded the skiff and got everything out of the skiff that we needed out and basically just sat around. We ended up eating. And after we got done eating, they were sitting down at cribbage before it got dark. And on the way up, I had just purchased this Remington 870 shotgun. It was rifled barrel. It was a slug gun. It was going to be my brush gun, right? Brushed stainless steel, beautiful shotgun. I had shot it a couple times at some ducks and it was off. So I was adjusting the rear sight. And my uncle was basically just dictating where he wanted bucket loads of pay dirt that we were going to collect. And so he was just telling us, this creek, you go up there, a mile and get 2 buckets there. And he was basically just dictating what was going to happen the next day. So I'm dinking around with this rear sight off and on, and it's about half hour after dark. And they're playing cribbage, and they have a Coleman lantern above their head, one of those white gas ones you got to pump up. I hate the sound of those because of this incident. So we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, the whole place is kind of, Now, let me explain what this place was. It was a glorified box. It was like 8 foot square, 2x4 construction with 5/8 plywood. There was 2 windows, 18-inch tall, 24 inches wide. They mirrored each other on each side. So when you come up the riverbank and you're looking at this place, the door is just offset to the left. There was an old drum stand with no drum because there was a little is basically an oil stove from a fishing boat that someone had set up inside that was no longer being used because this place was about 10 years antiquated. It was an old salmon counting tower, and there were still remnants of the tower where back when guys used to literally climb it and look down in the water and hit a little counter, literally counting the salmon as they swam by, right? And on the back end of this thing, dead center was an old 50s style little trailer. Ooh, like one of those egg-shaped ones that someone had cut the face off and MacGyvered it and attached it to this place. So one thing about remote Alaska and on state land, you can't have permanent structures. So this thing was built basically on skids, right? So the door off to the left, 5 plywood, small, rinky dink. Like, I mean, imagine 8 foot square, nothing to it, right? And then we had stuff here and there, and a good portion of the stuff we brought from the skiff was back in this little cubby, as I call it, because the back area was blacked out because land of the midnight sun. Whoever was working there at the time, they had to be able to get sleep, because they worked in shifts. So, and again, this place hadn't been used in probably 10 years, and it'd been there. I couldn't say when the last time somebody had been actively at this place, because like I said, my uncle figured all that stuff out and we were just worker bees. So half hour after dark, rough, give or take, the whole place creaks, just and so it's like a stiff wind hit the place, and so we kind of look at each other, and when I glance over where my cousin's sitting at this little card table, between his shoulder and I could see the top of the window, I saw darkness move. Well, we're next to a salmon river, so I immediately thought bear. So I grabbed that shotgun, and we had this 1,000,000 candlewatt powered spotlight. Took the big green, like square batteries, right? Big 6-volt. So we had that with a fresh battery. He grabbed the 30-06, and we were just going to open that door and run this bear off or shoot it if it charged us, just take care of it, run it off. We didn't want bears around. So when we swung open the door, I had the spotlight and I had the shotgun over my arm, and we check off to the right, which is the riverbank side, and there's nothing. And trust me, we were looking. And so we pan to the left, and me and him are just a step outside this door, just a step. And as I pan to the left, once we get I guess it would be between 10, 11 o'clock position is where the beam started hitting the tree line about 50 yards off to our left. And as soon as we panned over there, there was 3 sets of eye shine that were like fence post markers. That was real jarring at first, because we weren't expecting that, and in times past, when you spotlight a hairy man, they duck, they try to, avert their eyes or take cover. These things didn't care. There's 3 of them standing there. They didn't give a rat's ass about us or our light. So immediately we're right back inside, and all it had was this little J-hook and an eyelet or a lock. I mean, glorified bot, right? And so, sorry, I get a little, it messes with me sometimes. So we get back in, I hit that little J-hook, and it was real weird. It was like, as soon as I hit that J-hook, it was like earmuffs. There's this weird pressure. Ears hadn't popped from being on a plane, and the person next to you sounds like up in a jar 20 feet away. It was real weird, but it was constant pressure. And so I'm looking directly at my uncle, and I said, there's a hairy man out there. There's 3 hairy men. And I'm talking to my cousin, hey, you saw the hairy man? Because he was right there. I'm trying to explain it away, I guess, or just to get confirmation to make sure I wasn't seeing shit, And as we're talking, and this is all it, when it happened, it's taken me longer to explain it. So all of a sudden, because when it came in and I hit the J-hook, just before I hit the J-hook, I had dropped that spotlight, and I had my shotgun offhanded and holding the pistol grip with my left hand. And as I'm talking, my cousin was standing there next to me, right off my left shoulder, and he was holding the barrel of the 30-06 like you would a paddle, like if you had the buttstock was on the ground and he was holding the barrel. And all of a sudden, in a flash, he's under that card table, right? And this, it was chaotic because he flopped under there, knocked the chair back. I mean, it was real fast. And me and my uncle are like in shock because, again, it's all happened real quickly. And we looked down at him and we looked at each other. And when we looked back down at him again, it was like he was having a seizure. He had a death grip on that barrel of the 30-06, but we could see he was looking across at that other window on the riverbank side, the tree side. And so me and my uncle look at each other again, and we turn and look. And now this window, 18 inches tall, 24 inches wide, it was from where I was standing, from the end of the barrel of that shotgun, it was like maybe 2.5 feet, maybe that. I mean, it was right there. But when we turned and looked, this thing was looking down at my cousin, and we only saw from the bottom of the nose to the top of the eyebrows of this thing in that 18-inch space. Humongous. The eyes had to have been a foot apart. The eyes were like black translucent marbles. There was life in them because you could see the I guess, the light of life, if you will. But there's also a little bit of eye shine from the lamp inside. So there's this slight reddish glow going on inside there. And you could tell it was 3-dimensional because of that. Otherwise, you would have just thought it was like a rounded black marble, And it had grayish skin, like wrinkles upon wrinkles. Real large eye ridge or brow ridge, eyes sunk back in. Had a nose like us, downward facing, but it was flatter to the face, real broad, and it looked Native American around the eyes, around here, outside of that nose being so broad, and wrinkles upon wrinkles. I mean, weathered. It looked ancient. Now, this is all happening in milliseconds, but it's burned in my memory. And I remember distinctly because when I looked over at it, it was still looking at my cousin. Then it turned and looked at me, and I knew what food felt like. I knew I was food. There was no mind speak or anything. It was the energy and the way it felt. I was like, I got you. Like it owned us, basically, and it was just like autopilot. It was an autopilot response. I had that shotgun and I shot 3 times through the wall because it started moving out of view of the window. So I thumped 3 times through the wall, and that shotgun going off, it was like a thump, thump, thump. It typically a 12-gauge shotgun in that small of a space, ring, your head would just be ringing like a bell. But it was just a thump, thump, thump because of that pressure. And that pressure I'm talking about lasted the whole time. It didn't vary. It stayed just pressure. And so when I shot through the wall, like simultaneous scream, and the place shifted. It almost knocked me off my feet. It was so just violent. I thought it was going to throw us in the river. I thought we were going for a ride in the river. Like, again, it's all happening way faster than I can explain it. But the scream it let out was so loud and so intense that pot of stew on the little Coleman stove was ringing like a tuning fork. I mean, and that's with the muffled feeling of our that pressure. So at this point, my cousin's under the table. He's got a death grip on the 30-06. He had wet himself. My uncle basically shut down and sat down in that little cubby area, the little blackout sleeping area it's basically the portion that's the old trailer. And the shock to the system. So the best I could describe it, when I looked, and like the realization is like it's right fucking there. It felt like every nerve in my body wanted to run away, but it was stuck in my skin. So it was like an electrical shock, like a 220, like a hard electrical shock. And so standing there, I could smell the gunpowder. It's chaos. My cousin's out of commission. My uncle basically shut down, and I'm panicking, man. I'm shaking like a leaf. For whatever reason, I took the one chair and slid it over by the door. Fucking stupid. It wasn't going to do shit. But then I took the other chair and had the back of it towards the cubby because that cubby area was dead center. And I ended up just sitting there with that hiss of the Coleman lantern just off my right shoulder, just above me, and gripping that shotgun so hard, I would have to let go because I couldn't feel my hands. My hands would hurt. And then the feel of the fear was so deep when I would have to let go of that shotgun to pump that fucking lantern. I hate Coleman lanterns, at least those type. It was almost crippling, right? Just the thought of letting go of that handle of the gun to pump that thing. It was torture. And the only thing that stopped me from shaking because I was shaking like I was hypothermic, man. I mean, it was shock. The only thing that stopped me from shaking like that was accepting that I'm dead. Like, I had to accept that I wasn't going to see the other side of it. And that allowed me to strategize. They're going to get me. I don't know how yet. And trust me, scenarios were going through my head, but I promised myself I'm going to save one of these rounds, and not from myself, but when one of these fuckers get close enough where I could shoot it in the eye, nose, crotch, something. But that was the only way I could cope in the moment, was accepting that I was already dead. It was just a matter of how and when, right? Because these things were massive. The three at the tree line, just off the tree line, when we first saw the 3 sets of eye shine, like, this eye shine was like fence post markers, man. These things were over 10 foot tall, and that was just a quick glance, milliseconds, and we were back inside. But I know they were over 10 feet tall at least. The size of the face of the one in the window, I mean, 18-inch window, your bottom of the nose, top of the brow. That's all you saw.
How high was the window off the ground? If it was standing on the outside looking through.
Oh, it had to have crouched down to look in.
Okay.
That's another thing I was getting to. So the window, the bottom of it was 4 feet off the ground. Everything was made with minimal cuts. And so, the walls were 8 foot. It was like 8 foot or 4 foot or 2 foot. Everything was made minimal cuts, right? Because it was slapped together. It was temporary. And you know what? That's a good question. A lot of people had never asked that before. That's a very good question. But yeah, the bottom of the window, 4 foot off the ground. So everything's dead quiet. I'm sitting there. Gosh, man, my hand's shaking thinking about it. And like, resigning myself to death was the only thing that stopped me from shaking so hard to where I could at least focus on something. And I was trying to get response from my cousin. I had already tried to get the 30-06 from him, but he had such a death grip on it, and it was loaded. I didn't want to accidentally have it go off, especially how he was holding it. It was like he was having a seizure or something. And he would babble every few minutes, but he wasn't coherent for nothing. Now, this same cousin, let me explain. He is not just some weekend wallflower kind of guy. He's been shoulder to shoulder with me with a charging bear more than once, and I would have never ever thought that I would see him in that condition, because I felt like I was by myself and I was asking for help. I was trying to get any kind of advice from my uncle. He was talking about the fishing price and the amount of salmon they caught that year. It was like, it was deflecting. He was deflecting heavy. He was talking about anything but what was happening. And I got a full disclosure. I was cussing, like, I was calling them all sorts of bitches, like, help me. You guys are right here. Help me. And, that type of thing was going off and on. But I tell you, when a moth would hit that window, man, I can't count the times that alone almost gave me a nervous breakdown and just Swiss cheese the place. Because all I kept thinking about was, how are they going to smash this place and, snatch me up and bang me against a tree or whatever? Um, yeah, uh, it was a fucking nightmare. Um, because I was with two of the people that I still love dearly, and rest in peace to my uncle. But I would have never thought in a million years I would have felt that alone with these two. Like, because we're subsistence hunters, man. That's our culture. Hunting walrus, hunting. I mean, anyway, beluga, the whole bit. And to see them both in that condition was really hard to accept in that moment, because I just I would have never guessed. And it's not like I'm Bentley badass. Don't mistake what I'm saying. I only shot out of autopilot. It wasn't like I'm gonna save everybody. Nah, bullshit. I was scared to death, and it was more like get the fuck off me, like get off me. I didn't, actively think in my head, oh, I must shoot now to protect us. No, it was just boom, boom, boom. It was there was no heroics. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to paint that kind of picture like, oh, gee, it was only because of me. No, bullshit. I was scared to death.
How confident are you that you hit the thing when you shot?
Through the wall?
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
100%.
100%. The way it screamed and the way the place shifted, there was no doubt, and how much damage it did, I hope that fucker festered and died, to be honest with you. But again, there was no CSI after the fact, and I'll get to that. So sitting there and trying to kind of wrap my mind around what the hell to do, because I'm not getting advice from my uncle and my cousin. Like, forget it. So it had to have been about 5-ish hours, about a handful of hours that I sat there, pumping that freaking lantern and hoping I would never have to refill the fuel in it, right? Because the thought of it going dark and not having my hand on the gun, it's just too much to even wrap my mind around in that moment. And because it was, like I said, hard enough to even pump that stupid thing. But after about 5-ish hours, my cousin starts coming back around and he's mumbling, right? And so I start talking to him like, hey, help me, get up, help me, because I shot it ran off, we're safe. And I didn't know. I'm just selling him, a dream, like, hey man, we're good now, it's gone. I taught it a lesson, that kind of thing, a pep talk. And he got up, we got him cleaned up and changed out of his pissy clothes because I mean, you could see the embarrassment on his face, but once things calmed down, because after I shot through the wall and that scream, it was dead quiet for hours. I mean, dead quiet. And so talking to my cousin once he, came back to, I asked him, what did you see? Why did you end up under the table? Because it was so confusing to me to how that unfolded. And he told me that when I was trying to talk to my uncle, he was looking out that window and this thing was a little further back from the window and it smiled and he could only just barely make out the big block teeth. He said the canines were just a little bigger than ours, but it's just big wide jaw, big block teeth, and it smiled at him or showed its teeth basically. And he said he fell to the ground, because it was a shock to his system. And he said when he fell down to the ground, he was trying to tell us, look out, it's outside, but he couldn't. That's why it looked like he was having a seizure. He was trying to talk, but he couldn't because of the fear. And he said it was further away, and then it came closer and looked down just before we turned and saw it. So this thing was further away. He fell down. It drew it in closer, and it looked down at him. We turned to see it. It turned and looked at me and then fired through the wall, right? So he gets changed, and once he's back with us, so to speak, it's my uncle is like, we're all discussing, get the fuck out of here, right? But it's pitch black outside. And one of the issues we're going to have is when we got there, this particular skiff we used, 22-foot flat bottom, it was used for commercial fishing, set net site. So it was set up different than your regular skiff, in which the anchor line was like 70 feet, right? And when we got there, we drug the whole thing up and dug it into the tundra, the mossy kind of stuff. And I wasn't going to go and retrieve it. You know what I mean? So there's like 10, 12 foot of chain before the regular rope. And so I was saying, we got to cut that line. We're making our plans basically of what we're going to do. And so once we decide, we're just going to drift, we won't turn on the skiff because riding on the river at night is so dangerous. We figured what we'll do is make sure nothing's outside, and we'll creep away and just slink on out of there by drifting, and just stay quiet or whatever. That was the initial plan. So my cousin's like, well, let's use that spotlight and make sure they're gone. And so we had to kill that lamp because of the mirrored effect of the windows. And so we beamed out that card table side, the riverbank side first. And believe me, we were very meticulous looking. There was nothing there. We get to the other side and we're looking in the direction where we saw that eye shine, and there's nothing. It's dead quiet. Now, off kitty corner, off the back corner of this little building, this little shack was an old outhouse. It was about maybe 40-ish feet tops, just off that back corner. On the riverbank side, right? And it was just offset. And so once we're being that, we get to that outhouse, and behind it is this hulking pitch black figure, 13, 14 foot tall. And it wasn't right up on that outhouse. It was just back a little bit, but the top of the outhouse is about mid chest. And outhouse 8 foot tall, 8.5 foot tall, something like that. This thing was hulking big, like cartoon big, but the scariest thing, it was so black, it was absorbing the light. It was literally like this big black nothing was there for us. Like, that was the energy. It wasn't mind speak or anything, but once we saw that thing and it kind of moved a little bit, that light was off, and we were back in that cubby, and we were fucked up. My barrels crossed. I was babbling about I don't even know what. It was very just like, what do you do with that? Like, it was absorbing light, dude. This is a million kilowatt. This was a new battery in this thing, and it lights up shit. You know what I mean? And this thing absorbed it. It gave nothing back. No eye shine, no sheen from hair, none of that. It was just black nothingness, right? However, even though it was black nothingness, you could see it was bulky, hulking, cartoon big, man. It was cartoon big. So, when we're sitting there, it continued. No, there was no noise. The only noise was us, dead quiet, right? So, our original game plan, get the line cut and drip the hell out of there. Like, it's 20 feet to the edge of the riverbank, 6, 7 foot drop. I mean, it's right over there, but it felt like it was 20 miles away, and with how dark it was outside. So, we're getting our plan together. My cousin, the plan initially, he's going to cut the line so he can jump in, start up the skiff, and we're just going to hop in, do whatever to get out of there. Because he was only going to start it up initially, the first rendition of our plan, just to back away from shore out into the current and just let it, drift away. So we get that, we get it down. I mean, we only had important stuff, our wallets, extra ammo. Oh man. And the game plan was he was going to take the shotgun. I was going to have the 30-06. My uncle had this old Wingmaster shotgun, just big behemoth, like goose gun, basically. And we took the rounds out of that, the birdshot out of that, and replaced it with a bunch of the slugs I had. And our game plan was we're going to go out the door as a group. He was going to jump down, cut the line, get the skiff started. I was going to help my uncle because it was this pretty steep bank. And again, he was in his 60s. He wasn't feeble, but he wasn't overspry either, So all this stuff, all this planning was going on. And it was like, anytime we calmed down and we had the like thoughts to get going, it seemed like something else would happen, because in the near distance, it sounded like rotor wash from a helicopter, this thump, 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 thump sound. And it was like, what the hell is that? And we started feeling in the ground, it corresponding thump, thump, thump. And one of these things must have run by. And when that happened, a whole bunch of chaos around the outside. There's multiple of them running around, and you could tell they were running in different directions and stuff, but you could feel the weight difference from the impact on the ground, because just before that rotor wash kind of sound, that thump thump thump, just before that we had killed the lantern so we could eyes adjust and we could make our go. And that shit goes down immediately. We're tucked in a cubby, and it was like round a little bit and then back away, and then a moment later they would do it again, and it was like weird torture. Like I felt like they were toying with us, but like the second time they started running around, I could hear outside that little trailer, that attached trailer, one of them was sniffing it, like you would imagine a dog by your ear sniffing. It was sniffing the fucking trailer, man. And sheer terror. It was I don't even know, man. It was insane. So that happened a few times, and they backed away, and it gets dead quiet again, right? And so with it being quiet, we steeled our reserve, so to speak, and we okay. And one of the things that was working for us is it wasn't light out yet, but the sky was different. We knew we weren't horribly far from daylight coming, right? So that was in our favor, and that kind of motivated us too. It kind of gave us, a glimmer, light at the end of the tunnel type shit. And as we're sitting there, we're trying to fine tune this plan, because it's not like we've done this shit before, and my cousin was kind of losing it, and there's a 16 penny nail that we've been kicking around since we got there. God only knows how long it was been there, but he was talking about nailing the door shut or something. I was like, think about what you're saying, stay here with me. Nailing that door shut ain't gonna do shit. These things are massive, and there was all sorts of different little discussions going on like that. And so it finally, we were like, okay, the light adjusted enough to where it's not light out, but we can make the tops of the trees out because of the light in the sky. We get up on the door. My cousin's in front of me. He's got my shotgun. I'm right behind him with the 30-06, that my uncle's shotgun over my shoulder, and my uncle stand behind me. And we're literally just about to go out that door, right? Because after the thumping, running around stuff, we checked again, didn't see nothing, and there was no movements or anything like that. But just as we're about to go out, it sounded like someone shooting a pellet gun at the place. There was this stack, and it was a slow cadence at first, and then it just sounded like a hailstorm. And it was on the side we were going to go out. So immediately we right back in that little cubby, rifles crossed again. It was an unsafe environment. So that happens. We're sitting in there, and I was really feeling toyed with, but stuck. Like it was weird torture. It was like every time we were getting up the gall to make a break for it, or what have you, something else terrifying would happen that would spook us, and it was like they were thriving on it. It felt like, that's speculation, 2020 hindsight, but that's what it felt like we were being toyed with. So after I'm guesstimating, because there's a lot of trauma involved, so 45 minutes, hour-ish, somewhere in that time frame, it's definitely light enough out to where our confidence really boosted up, because you can easily see the tree line. You couldn't see into the trees because they were dark still, because of the dark canopy, the trees, but you could see all the open ground. I knelt down and set the 30-06 down on the ground, and I helped my uncle around to get his footing, because it was kind of a steep decline down to the little landing there, and the dew on the grass, for him it was probably pretty slick, and he couldn't just jump it, right? So he got his footing, and when I was knelt down, that shotgun over my shoulder was kind of pushing me forward a little bit. So when I grabbed the 30-06, I slid back about 4-6 inches and then stood up. When I got up to full height, right off the bill of my hat, this rock, a little bigger than a basketball, just whizzes by my face. Fast and hard, and everything went slow motion, and I locked onto that thing, and it hit the river in about 3 feet of water on a fast moving river, right? And it hit so hard, it hit the bottom of the river and made the sound like a gun going off before the water could close over it. And at that moment, that pressure that had been going on the whole time, it stopped. But everything was still slow motion. And I turned to my left, and coming out of the trees was that big black silhouette. Like it was gliding out, kind of like an old Dracula movie, it come through the fog, like it's just floating.
Yep.
And immediately, I put 3 shots on this thing with the 30-06 center mass. I had no head or anything. It was just big black silhouette, so I put 3 shots center mass. And that 30-06 has never failed us. That same identical rifle killed walrus, beluga, you name big animals, bears. I hit this thing 3 shot center mass. You heard the impact of the 180 grain soft tip core lock rounds, and it just stopped moving forward. It didn't flinch, it didn't buckle or nothing. And at that point, like, my tunnel vision was hard. Everything was just closing in, but there was movement on either side, right? But again, my focus was, I figured that big fucker through the rock. It did nothing. It was just stopped moving, and I immediately jumped down to the landing where the little skiff was and stuff, and he didn't cut the rope. And so I'm yelling, throw me my knife, as I set the 30-06 in, and he threw the knife. I caught it, and I noticed my shotgun on the shore. So I don't know when he jumped down, if he just dropped it out of excitement and got in the boat to start it or whatever. But anyway, my shotgun was on the ground, and I made a mental note, because at this point, everything was just like slow motion almost. So I cut the line. I'm putting the line in, and I look over, and my uncle had sat on the edge with his feet outside of the skiff. So I went around real quick, and I shoved him in, and I shoved him pretty hard. I felt bad about it, but I was like, we got to, it's time to go. He had ended up hurting his wrist and stuff, but I shoved him in. I come back around. I'm getting the rest of that chain in. And as I'm doing so, he got the kicker started, but it was idling too high for him to shift. And I'm like, throttle down. Because, he was trying to put it in reverse, and the throttle was just too high to shift. And just as he kicked it into reverse, they're both looking my direction, because when I pushed my uncle in, he shifted and turned and was facing back towards me, and their eyes got real big, and they're looking over my shoulder at the riverbank. And as I start pushing off, he had just gotten it into reverse. I look over my shoulder, and I saw up to about the shins of whichever one was standing up there. It had black hair, but the tips were like that orangutan rusty orange kind of color to them. It wasn't that same one. It was a different one, but it was standing right there. And so I got that 30-06. My shotgun's still up on the riverbank somewhere, unless someone found it. But when I got into the skiff, he's backing up, right? And I'm tunnel visioned. I got the bolt of that 30-06 open, and I'm looking for 220 grain, and everything's just like a goulash of what the fuck, So I'm trying to focus on put these rounds, and I notice we're going forward now, but we're kind of cutting back and forth. And I thought he was just trying to break friction and get up on step. But to find out, like 15 years later, they were actually actively throwing rocks at the outboard, and there was a big dent in the transom on the back of the skiff, and a cracked cowling from these things chucking rocks trying to disable it. And again, unanswered questions like, why didn't they disable it while we were in the shack? There's so many unanswered questions about it. It's just mind boggling. But, I couldn't tell you exactly how long it was before I looked up. But at one point, like right after we were getting away from shore and stuff, I had looked up when we were going along, and I saw a movement off to the left up on the riverbank inside the trees. But once we got moving, my concern was these things cutting us off and pushing trees down, deadfall in front of us. That, thank God, that didn't happen. But once we got some miles down the river and whatnot, things calmed down a little bit. And then once we got to the confluence of the Nuyuk to the Nuyuk River, I felt like I weighed 1,000 pounds, man. It was a fucked up deal. It ruined our relationship, us three. We used to be like peas in a pod that died that day. It It was messed up is what it was. But I mean that's essentially what happened.
Okay, so for those of you that are new here, I have a background in tech and in AI specifically. So one day I was sitting in my car and I thought to myself, I think AI is going to help us understand these experiences a little bit more than we currently do. And I want to be a part of that revolution. So I created an agentic AI named Scully that I feed the transcript of every episode, and she helps us navigate kind of through the bullshit and helps us push our scientific understanding a little bit further. So for Fred's episode, I gave her the entire transcript, and what you're about to hear next is a very candid conversation between me and my AI named Scully. All right, Scully, so I've given you Fred's transcript. What are your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts are that Fred's story is definitely one of those encounters that stands out because of its complexity and their sheer level of detail. It's not just a single sighting. It's a layered experience with a lot of recurring patterns that we've seen in other high strangeness cases. What makes it meaningful to cause on is the Fred's account has elements like toward-related behavior, unusual physiological effects, and a real sense of a strategic presence that goes beyond ordinary wildlife encounters. One thing we could do is look at how often these kinds of encounters involve similar physiological sensations or coordinated actions. That gives us a direction to understand it better, not to explain it away, but to really see what's consistent and what's unique.
That's a really good point. I'm curious to see if this is like the first of its kind. I'm not a Bigfoot expert by any stretch of the imagination. So has there been other experiences like this that mimic Fred's encounter?
Is actually more common than you might think in these kinds of high strangeness encounters. We do see a number of reports where witnesses describe not just a single creature, but multiple entities acting in a coordinated way. That might mean flanking movements, strategic positioning, or even what looks like attempts to influence the human's behavior. One well-known case that's often referenced is the Ape Canyon incident of 1924 in Washington state. In that case, a group of miners reported being besieged by several large hairy creatures that threw rocks at their cabin, worked together to try to break in, and displayed coordinated behavior that the witnesses found incredibly unsettling. So that's a documented historical example that lines up with what Fred described: multiple entities, rock throwing, and a sense of a coordinated effort.
So I did a deep dive into this Ape Canyon incident in 1924, and something immediately jumped out to me that I just can't wave off. And that's the fact that the miners in the 1924 incident in Ape Canyon and Fred and his cousin and uncle had something very unique in common. Both of them were on a gold expedition. Could that be a coincidence? I don't know. Maybe. But I just can't shake it. That's just a weird coincidence, in my opinion. I don't know. For the record, I believe Fred. I think he experienced something very bizarre in the wilderness that day. So I don't think he's lying. But that one little nuanced fact about the gold is just, it's yelling and screaming in my ears. Now, there's more common denominators between Fred's story and this 1924 incident. For example, there's rock throwing. There's this siege behavior that's happening with multiple entities. And both experiences involve a small group of individuals, not just a solo traveler. They were also very far away in isolation, almost too far from help. In both situations, the parties involved stayed long enough in the circumstance for things to escalate. There's just a lot of common denominators here between these two stories. But if we want to think about it more proactively, perhaps these common denominators are more important than we think that they are. For example, does the fact that both groups were traveling for the extraction of gold have anything to do with it? Again, on the surface, that sounds crazy. But if we're trying to think about this scientifically, just maybe that's related. And maybe staying around river systems in these vastly remote areas for a prolonged period of time also has something to do with it as well. Not just these, few days or a week expeditions. Maybe you have to be out there for a long enough time. Maybe there's something there that is important. So maybe like a combination of digging around, lingering, altering the environment perhaps. Maybe it creates conditions where these entities feel threatened. It makes sense. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I wouldn't say that this is just a random coincidence. It's definitely some sort of pattern. And I think if you're listening to this, you can fall on one side of the aisle here. You could think that Fred is completely making this up and just stealing the story from 1924, or there's a pattern forming. But again, I want to reiterate, I believe Fred. I don't know if it was the hairy man. I don't know if it was Bigfoot, but he definitely experienced something that was unexplainable that day. And so did his cousin and uncle. So the interview continued, and we talked to Fred about some other things, including his website that is also preserving other experiences in Alaska with the hairy man. So this is the rest of the conversation we had with Fred. I guess the first question I have is, you mentioned it screaming a couple times in the main story and even previously. I'm not going to ask you to reenact it, but like, what did it sound like? More human? Did it sound more like a grizzly? Did it like, was it a growl, not a scream? Like, how could you describe it a little bit more?
It was like a mix of like a roar, a high pitched scream, like whether or not it fucking wasn't human. I mean, it was very intense, and understand I had that earmuff feeling, the pressure in my ear. So, yeah. It was definitely a scream, but it was so powerful. It reverberated to the place where that pot was like ringing like a tuning fork, loud enough to, even with that pressure, you could hear it. Ing. It was intense, very powerful. And it wasn't super long. It was, again, there's trauma involved. So like certain 10, 15, 20 seconds, whatever, it wasn't registering at the time, but it was abrupt, loud, intense, and the shifting of that place simultaneously. I mean, genuinely, with how big it was, I thought we were going for a ride on the river. Like, I thought we were going to get chucked as a river, because it moved so abruptly. It literally almost took me off my feet.
Wow.
And loud, like you felt it through every fiber of your being. You know, my hair was a little longer at the time, but I could even feel the hair vibrating underneath my hat, like intense.
Wow. Jeez.
And
you said too
I
that,
do have to say, bro, the symmetrical eyelashes, bro. Women would kill for those kind of, the eyelashes this thing had were. It's weird the minute things you remember, but I remember thinking those eyelashes are beautiful, like real thick and lush, and just look perfect. Forgive me, it's just amazing the stupid shit that sticks out in your mind.
Sure.
And you know, when that kind of shit happens.
Yeah. And
But I'll never forget that look it gave me of, like, you know, your food. I genuinely felt like food.
jeez.
Which is a creepy fucking feeling, man. But it wasn't the feeling, it was a knowing. It was like that primal fear. I think all of us have it. It's just we've been so modernized and safe with how we live nowadays that it's dormant. You know, I think every single one of us has it, and it fired mine right up. I recognized predator, I'm prey. There was, again, no mind speak. It was the energy in the air. It was not there to teach us to pick berries or weave a fucking basket, man. It was all bad.
Do you think that there is an element of, like, I guess you could call it like paranormal involved with Sasquatch, that it's not just like a physical primate? And the reason I ask that is the part of the story you told where you had, I think it was your 36, and you shot it center mass and it didn't move at all. It just like stopped moving forward.
of the 30-06.
30-06.
Yeah, it just stopped moving forward. I heard the impact of the bullets. Lifelong subsistence hunter. You know, I was missing. Believe me, it was 50 yards or less, and I don't know. Because like had I not heard the impacts, I'd probably view it a little differently. But I heard the impact of the bullets, and there's no mistaking that suck sound. That yeah, you know, I couldn't say there's not, you know, but again, you know, it's not like that. I saw him dancing around the Ouija board before they started, you know, running around or any shit like that. But again, you know, I wasn't necessarily in my right mind either, you know, and I try to remember that, you know what I mean?
There's a similar story though, because I know it. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, but there's a story of there was a giant wolf that came onto the property.
Oh yeah, and they kept shooting it, and it was just unfazed,
Yeah.
like it just kept on about its business. Yeah, I heard about that. That would be fucked up. Can you imagine?
Yeah. That's what your story kind of that part of the story reminded me of, though, is that there was this gigantic creature of some sort that just wasn't reacting to bullets.
I'm relieved it stopped. Right, I'm relieved it stopped moving forward, man, because I had no answer for it. You know, I would have never like a 30-06. I'm telling you, that's identical rifle, the same one we killed walrus with, man. 2,000 plus pound shot or two, done. Like done. Moose, one shot, one killed, done. Bear, same thing, you know.
And this thing took three shots to the center mass. That's what you.
Yep, center mass, 180 grain, soft tip core locks, man. Deadliest mushrooms in the woods. Best hunting round ever made, in my opinion.
And no reaction either. Like it wasn't even like it was like stunned at all or anything. It was just ate it.
No, it just stopped moving forward. Yeah, ate it. I hope that bastard festered and died. I mean, now I know not everyone has this kind of experience, you know. One thing that's unique that I found out years later, because in our culture, it's a bad omen to speak about it. It's a bad omen to chase after, a bad omen to go looking for them, that type of thing, right? And so I was just trying to warn people, you know, when we initially got back to Dillingham after this, and anyone with the pair of ears, I'm like, hey, man, these fuckers try to kill us up on the Nuyuk, you know. I laid out who was with us, told people what happened. They'd look at me crazy. I was like, go ask them yourself. And what really messed me up about it was I just didn't support it, you know. And then over a little bit of time, I wasn't even part of the journey up there, and they didn't even go until months later, type thing. It unnecessary shit. Because again, my uncle at the time was part of the North Pacific Walrus Commission, and there was a certain separation. They didn't want to be accounted with what had happened. They didn't want to be linked to it. Kind of real weird. It got like almost political. But again, I can't answer for them. But yeah, that's another thing that caused further rift was they wouldn't deny it, but then they, you know, over time when people were like, hey, what's going on? They would just start outright like, we didn't even make it up this year, and you know, this and that, even though a bunch of different people already knew we had been up there, you know, especially family members and stuff. It was hard to swallow. And that
I can imagine,
you know, kind of cemented that rift, even though before my uncle passed, I was able to talk to him for a little bit with my dad standing there. And I said, hey, uncle, man, you know, I hope you know that I love you. I've always loved you. You're my favorite uncle. And he goes, yeah, I know, because my nickname is Baby Fred with the family. He goes, I know Baby Fred. And he had mentioned I did really good that night on the Nuyuk, you know, which was a form of validation, but I didn't need it. But it was good to hear him verbally say that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
because like I self-medicated for like 4 years, man. I fell into a bottle. It was like a weird survivor's kind of guilt, even though no one had died. A part of me died. Food didn't taste the same. The flowers weren't as pretty, that kind of thing, because I had literally put it in my head that I was a dead man. And, I've gained some of that joy of life back, grant you, but there's always been a part of me since then that the joy of like that adventure is part of it's dead, you know?
Yeah. I can definitely empathize with that for sure. I mean, that's just hearing the story is like traumatizing. I can only imagine like physically being there. Did you ever, you probably didn't, but did you ever go back to that location?
No, we left thousands of dollars worth of gear, that shotgun on the riverbank. And I plan on doing a documentary at some point, which is going to, it's basically going to pertain to our oral history. So, we were taught about this as kids and warned, hairy man, little people, all the things that are pertinent to daily life. And there's academics, folklore, and this and that, and that's bullshit. It's an oral history. And it's the same. It's the reason we're alive today. It's not wasted words. We don't have campfire stories and bedtime stories. That's not the reality of it. The reality is it's need to know information, hunting grounds, winter camp, fishing, wherever. It was always, information to keep us safe. And these things were a part of it, for over millennia, and it kind of irks me that they kind of dismiss it as folklore and mythology. And it's like, think what you will there, but my oral history goes back long before Cambridge was built in 1693, so anyway, I'll
just mention there, Fred, that there is a lot of similarities in how you just described the oral history.
Sorry.
With what's happening.
Right, neighbor was shooting a gun.
Oh, that's okay.
Got my attention.
No worries, man. There's a lot of similarities in how you explained the oral history with the Australian Indigenous peoples as well. They refer to them in Australia as Yowies or the hairy man. And generally speaking, had regular conflicts with them. And some tribes would actively hunt and they would share these stories. And as you know, lots of people dismiss them as just myths or campfire stories or folk tales, but a number of tribes still maintain that no, these are there and this is how we dealt with them and how we avoided them, and the stories were told just to keep their own people alive and well. But I want to go back, if it's okay with you, Fred. I actually have a few questions about your experience in that.
Definitely.
In that hut, in that box. So, you mentioned that you got a really good look at a portion of its face. You saw its eyelashes, and you saw lots and lots of wrinkles and creases, aged, like a very aged and weathered face. Then you mentioned that your cousin, I believe, saw it smile or saw it show its teeth. And he described, did you see that as well? Or was that just your cousin that saw the teeth and described the molars and the...
My cousin described the teeth as big block teeth. The eye teeth like we have were just a little more profound than what we have. There was no fangs or anything like that, but that's because I'm sure it's ingrained in his memory as well. But I didn't see that smile. It was further away from that window. When he saw it, freaked him out. He clapped under the table, and then that's when it came in closer, and then we turned and seen it.
When you first opened the door, then, and you saw the eye shine, you mentioned they were like, they were really reflective. You saw 3,
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yep, 3 sets.
So that
6 altogether, 3 sets.
Yep, and so then you saw that much taller mass standing behind the outhouse. Was that a fourth? Yeah. Was that a fourth one, or was that one of the 3? Do you know?
Well, okay. So I've thought about it a lot. In 2020 hindsight, the one that showed its teeth and I saw in the window, I think was already around that corner. I think we're being lured out to be ambushed. But had we not seen those 3 sets of eye shine, we would have walked one step, 2 steps, we would have been around that corner, and that one I feel was already there because of how quick it all went down. Because as soon as we got back in, I shipped, I hit that hook, everything went muffled, and it was like everyone. I was talking fast, and so it all happened so quick. With how big they were, I would have felt it coming up, quickly. At least I think I would, but I could be wrong with that. But so I count the 3, the one outside the window that I shot through the wall. That's the 4th, and the 5th one was that pitch black one that absorbed light. So, and once they were running around, it felt like the 5. But again, I wasn't looking, man, and I wasn't in the best state of mind, so to speak.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Can I take you back just a little bit then to the moment where you've gotten onto the boat, and you notice that your cousin and your uncle are wide-eyed looking over your shoulder, and you turn around, and you said you saw basically up to its shin. Is that right?
Yeah.
Now, that one you described the hair as being black, but sort of having this rusty orange tip, more like maybe an orangutan.
Yeah,
Is
it
that?
kind of remind me of like a rose hair tarantula. They look all black,
Oh, yep.
and they have the tips of their hairs is that rose color. It was similar to that, but with like that rusty orangutan orange kind of look to the tips of the hair.
Okay. Is in that moment, I mean, is there anything else you recall environmentally happening around that time? It sounds like the way you've described it, they were very much trying to lure you out. It almost seems like they were trying to spring a trap, and it seems like you feel that way as well.
When they were running around, there was noises going on. I don't know what it was exactly, but I was so terrified I couldn't tell you if it was what it was. But there was definitely aggressive noises and different grunts and stuff happening during that time period. When everything was going on and I was pushing the boat off and I looked over my shoulder, there was noises going on around the environment. But you got to remember, at that time, my tunnel vision, man, I could have, I mean, it was, the shock was just, it was taken over,
Yeah. Of course.
I mean, because when I was knelt down in the bow of the skiff and I'm trying to put the rounds in, I could barely see the bolt because it was just so surreal. Yeah, it was. I'm sure there's stuff that because of the trauma of it, noises and other things that. Like, one thing I know for sure though, when I was looking at the big dark one when I shot it, with the 30-06 before jumping down, there was movement like going off from either side of it in the tree line, but my tunnel vision was just like collapsing down. It was just, I was focused on that one because I figured that one through the rock. And had I not scooted back the 4 to 6 inches, we wouldn't have this conversation. It would have took my head off. I mean, it was that close, and it had to have already been in the air before I stood up. And that's mind-boggling. When I wrap my mind around that, it was like it was moving pretty damn fast, but it had to have been planning on where I was going to stand up. You know what I mean? And had I not scooted back and before I stood up, I mean,
It was aiming. You felt like it was aiming for you.
Well, definitely seems like it was.
Oh yeah, I had no doubt.
Yeah.
I had no doubt because again, it had to already been on its way, even though it's coming really fast. It had to have been on its way to meet me when I stood. Because no sooner than I came to full height, which I meant we're talking milliseconds, man. It whizzed by my face, like, and yeah, I'll never forget that feeling of everything going slow motion. I felt it before, but it was never like this was so intense, that slow motion, because I immediately followed it, and the way it impacted the water so hard. And once it impacted the water, that muffled feeling went away. But at that point, everything was so slow motion from the shock of what was going on, that adrenaline dump, And I have never operated a bolt action rifle so efficiently in my life, man. It was just bam, bam, bam. It must have sounded like a semi-auto. But yeah, and like even right now, I chose not to do this in my house because my dogs will sense my anxiety and they get all weirded out and start growling and barking like, dad's in danger kind of thing. Cause I got 3 pit bulls. But yeah, it's been over 18 and a half years. This September, it'll be 19 years that this happened. And there's times I could share it. It doesn't affect me as bad. And other times I share it where I smell the moss from the floor. I could smell the old, stove oil from that little drip stove. And yeah, it's definitely helped a lot sharing it and expressing it. Because only thing I gain is scrutiny and bullshit. But for public safety, man, for people to understand, they're not our forest friends, man. They're not forest protectors either. And let me tell you why I come up with that, because we are literally missing about 90% of our forests across the country here. If they were forest protectors and they've been around all this time, then why in the hell is the logging industry and, remote oil rigs in the woods and stuff still going on, mining? I don't buy forest friend bullshit. I just don't. But I'm biased, of course, because of what I just explained. I say eradicate all of them, but that's my own personal feelings,
Yeah, I think, part of the reason we did this podcast or started this podcast is to try to get some answers as to what is going on with all this stuff. Everything unexplainable. It's not just Sasquatch or not just aliens. It's just, even things that people that don't even like fit into a category, and I guess,
right.
A question I would have for you would be, do you think is there a benefit to, for lack of a better phrase, like proving the existence of the hairy man? Like, would there be any benefit if they were to find it and be able to capture it or capture one or get a dead one or something? Like, do you think that'd be a good thing or a bad thing?
It would be redemption for a lot of people, who have been mocked. That's one of the reasons I share people's encounters, because a lot of times they'll default to me because of my heritage. Like when I talk to the people before I share their experience, I talk to them several times so I can lay out and give the picture in the mind. But that's part of my coming from an oral history, which has benefited me in explaining things. But I talked to them several times, and I think people being heard and not being like ridiculed. People self-medicate to this day. Miss Carol, she can't even go to her home on the same property her husband's buried because of harassment. I mean, last year we had this orb try to lure me off into the woods. My buddy, I call him Squatch Bait, Ryan. It freaked him out. He was standing on the porch beside me with the XBR, but 308 tactical rifle, and he was like, "We should go inside now." And I was like, "Yeah, no shit." There's stuff going on where it would blow people's minds to really hear and truly understand what's going on in some of these remote villages as we speak. Like, it is mind-blowing. And I'm from the culture. I'm like, damn. I had one kid in Plywood years ago. This little kid was maybe 6-7 years old, and he walked up, and we're getting fuel for something or another. We're going to go up the Mulchatna River. And this was years before the hairy man thing, but he walks up and he goes, "A hairy man jumped over my house last winter. My uncle was trying to shoot it," and walked off. Little kid, just unprompted, just walked over and said that. But it's so ingrained in the culture. It's just like saying, "Oh, there was a moose across the runway." You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it was just nonchalant. Like, yeah, matter of fact. And, to those non-believers or naysayers, that's on them, because my give a shit button is busted. I don't care what they feel is irrelevant compared to what happened, and it means nothing to me.
I think this might be a good time to just flag that, Fred, you have the subarctic Alaska Sasquatch.com website.
Yeah.
And one of the things you're doing on there is mapping, recording, and cataloging and tagging very nicely and conveniently experiences that people are having with the hairy man across Alaska, many of which are non-pleasant experiences. You also bring attention to the number of people who go missing every year in Alaska, which is not an insignificant number. It's 500 to a few thousand, I believe, and you've got a little line on the website that I think is really important, which is even if one of them is from the hairy man, that's too many. And I wanted to ask, in your years of cataloging these encounters and researching them, have there been encounters brought to your attention that come close to what you experienced, or that have similar elements like the ear pressure and things like that?
Yeah, the Nuyuk River, the place we were. Like, okay, so shortly after I started the channel, I started reaching out to relatives, cousins, and stuff, and because basically garnering content, talking to people, my native folks, start at home, and I reached out to one of my cousins, Nikolai, and I was like, we were talking about unrelated stuff, and it dawned on me before I got off the phone. I was like, oh, hey, look, hey, you got any good hairy man stories? Not good like woo, cheery, but any, hairy man stories. And the first thing out of his mouth was, have you ever been on the Nuyuk River?
Mhm.
And I kind of nervously chuckled and was like, tell me about it. I didn't answer him at the time, but they had similar things. The one they dealt with actually came into this larger cabin further down by Kalignik and almost snatched the guy out of there. They shot at it. They shot at the one that was on the top of a shed, and like, come to find out, I'm not going to like put anyone on blast, but several different people have had very similar situations where they had to fire at these things to get out of there. One poor lady, she went up there and she was going to set a net for whitefish, and so she anchored the line on shore and was back motoring out to set the net, pulling it out, right? And she's looking down at the net, making sure it's not tangled, and all of a sudden she realized she's being pulled back towards shore, and so she looks up, and this thing was on shore, pulling her back in by the net, because the net was still attached to the bow of the boat, and she freaked out and had to shoot shots at this thing for it to take off. And so she cut the line and got the hell out of there. Gosh, I could probably rattle off about a dozen different experiences of very similar things where shots had to be fired because of the level of aggression, and these things not giving a rat's ass if it's daylight, midnight, it just doesn't matter. And that's scary in and of itself, because the native culture, we're taught it's a bad omen to even speak about it. So that's why we call it the hairy man. We don't use the Yupik word, the native word for it, because that, in using that word, is like guaranteeing bad omens, people dying, bad fish catch, bad hunting season, just bad all the way around. And so, yeah, there's several, and some even worse that I can't share here because I don't have permission. But I have, like, on that map right now, that interactive map, there's 270 something little marker pins. But my personal map, because I invite people to share even if they don't want it public, my personal map has 3 times as many markers on it, and it's shocking. Because when you have something like happen like I did, you kind of self-isolate and you feel like you're the only one, right? And so it makes it hard to even talk about, because it took me over 15, 16 years to even speak of it like I am now. And it's not unique to me. And I always thought it was. But it's not unique at all. It's actually a terrifying thought. Yeah, because God only knows those who didn't make it out to even talk about it. Because there's plenty of people missing up that way too. Yeah, and you try to garner info. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, sorry, you finish off that sentence, mate.
Oh, I was gonna say I wanted to integrate missing people with the channel and kind of showcase stuff, but the only thing you could find on a missing person is that initial missing person bulletin, which is very limited on information. It doesn't have context. And when you try to dig deeper, freedom of information, what have you, they have the cop out that it's still an open investigation, even if you're going back, to the beginning of when they were taking reports. So you can't really get information about the missing people. It's just people disappear, like gone, not a trace, where tracking dogs won't even try to track them down. There was a missing hunter from a couple of years ago up by Coldfoot, hunting caribou. His name was Kevin something or another. I'm not trying to put him on blast, but it was a hunter. He went missing, gone, no sign of him. People try to say, oh, they wouldn't let the tracking dogs work. That's bullshit. My brother's a state trooper. I found out that they took several different types of tracking dogs up there, and the dogs would not track. They just laid down. They didn't want to participate. So, people get the wrong information at times. And that's another reason for the channel and the website is you'll never catch me asking, oh, you got to believe this, or this is crazy. No, I just lay it out for what it is, and I don't give a shit what anyone thinks. It's to help those who are in the know or who want to stay safe, to maybe they heard a story about a weird owl hoot and they're in that area or a similar area, and they hear a mimic of an owl hoot that just doesn't sound natural, because there's no 800-pound, 1,000-pound owls. You know what I mean? And so maybe that will help somebody and go, I think maybe we should relocate and save themselves grief. That's the main reason. It's like being bear aware. When you know bear behavior, you're more readily able to witness and understand, oh, that's bear behavior. Let's get out of here. You know what I mean? You're more adept to the type of shenanigans that could happen, imitating voices, babies crying. Okay, these things are on a level of cunning where they imitate a known baby cry to lure women out, using their own instincts against them. That is top level predatory behavior. Like, that's on a psychological level of using someone's natural being against them as a trap.
It's like a duck call or something.
Leveraging our instincts, right?
Yeah.
There's a common thread, Fred, that I'd like to get your thoughts on with your story, and several others that I've looked into as part of what we're doing here, and including speaking to other people who are trying to create awareness in the space. Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who I believe you've met, and as well as going through lots of reports across both Australia and parts of Europe, Asia, and North America. And that's the growl and the sound, the scream, but particularly the sensations and feelings that come with that. You hearing something around you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I heard a woof, but it wasn't like a bear grunt. Sorry, I just have to
have a quick look.
You got to be aware of your surroundings. Forgive me. No, it was just it was off in the distance, but I wanted to make sure that it wasn't behind me over my shoulder. Like I was saying earlier, if you guys see a bear, warn me.
I'm keeping an eye out
We'll
for
let
you.
you know.
So that growl.
There's this common thing with the growls that I just wanted to sort of get your thoughts on, and that's the sort of debilitating sense of dread and tunnel vision, and then the pressure in the ears is a really interesting thing.
Right.
One of the paths that I've had to go down in researching this topic is the use of infrasound by various mammals.
Yeah, but I've also checked into infrasound because that's the only thing that makes sense for what happened with us. Because as you researching it, we only hear down to 20 hertz.
Yes.
And anything under that we feel. And so it's the only thing that makes sense because it was constant, and I don't know how it remained constant, but because it didn't fluctuate at all. But yeah, that's the only thing that makes sense. And in all reality, it's probably something that affected my cousin too, because we were just inside the door not even a handful of seconds with that pressure kicked up before he was debilitated under the table. So I definitely think there's validity to that.
The instincts that the hairy man experienced, that the creatures had in that story that happened to you in your experience, it it feels very similar in a way to how some sea life hunt using infrasound to disorient and isolate certain individuals to then go in and attack orcas, other kinds of whale. Elephants use it in a similar way. But the ear pressure is a really common occurrence when around infrasound. It gives you the sensation that the pressure is different and your ears are blocked, which can be really disorienting. And have there been many other accounts that you've come across where the ear pressure specifically has come up?
Yeah. Part of the reason for the pins on the map and the markings, and my own personal one where I accumulate other ones that people don't want it public. The certain areas have that as a common denominator, and like the Nuyuk drainage down in the Bristol Bay, that whole area where my home is, where I'm from like Wood Tick Chick, Lake Iliamna, down Queejack, and all that whole Bristol Bay area has more of those types of instances than, let's say, the Copper River or the interior. You know what I mean? So there's something to it, but geographically speaking, it seems like in some areas it's more widespread. Maybe it's gosh, I don't want to speculate too much because I don't know shit. I know enough to know that I don't know anything, but there's definitely something to it, and it's not unique to the experience I had. That's for damn sure. There's quite a few. I plan on at some point publishing information as far as like that goes. The infrasound, the earmuff sounds, where the most owl imitation versus just weird whistles compared to time of year area. It's going to be like broke down on like a spreadsheet type thing where you have different, attributes to encounters that it's going to be like kind of broken down. But I'm not a tech guy. My buddy, I call him Squatchbait. He's an IT tech as well. So he's compiling that kind of information and stuff. There's so many unanswered questions. You know what I mean? It seems like as soon as you feel close to answering one, there's 5 others that pop up from that. And it's like,
what are your thoughts on
on
as a hunter? How could an animal, if you want to call it that, we don't really know if it is an animal or for something more like metaphysical, but how could an animal be so elusive? Like you would think that obviously, I'm sure you find moose bones and scraps from wolf kills and things like that. How do you what do you think about that when it comes to Sasquatch and like why you don't find more evidence of that?
You find the evidence of game animals. Predators, however, how many dead bears, how many dead mountain lions, how many dead wolves are people finding? Not many. I found one dead black bear one time, and it was spookily enough, it was 50 yards from an encounter location at a Clutton Lake. But outside of that, you don't find dead predators.
That's a good point.
You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
And so, like, my point of view is if we have 1,600-pound brown bears that only feed a short period of the year and then go hibernate, not that I'm not saying these things hibernate, I'm just saying if they're able to accumulate enough calories in that time to survive, hibernation, being omnivores, what have you, these things have the same, survival chance. Because if we look at the encounters and break them down for what they are, the large majority happen at resource gathering areas, picking berries, hunting grounds, fishing areas. These are resource gathering areas. We have an extreme environment that isn't very long to gather these resources. So I think there's a larger role being played the environment, and I can only speak for Alaska because we have such a short season here, that I think the majority of the aggression, the food pressures, and those resource gathering areas, that have the most conflict, they're the most contested grounds, let's say. And outside of some instances where they just seem like they're fucking with people in their cabin, yeah, I mean, the large majority of it, I feel, is resource driven.
Makes
You know,
sense. That does make a lot of sense. And the idea of not finding the remnants of predators, I didn't even consider that, because you're absolutely right. That's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, it's rare. I'm one of the few people that I'm aware of that found a dead black. I got it on film, so I'm not just trying to make shit up.
No,
But
I gotcha, yeah.
yeah, finding a dead predator is something else. Like it was. I think what spooked me out the most is this is after my experience, and then knowing what I know about finding a dead predator is so rare. Finding one at an actual encounter location less than 50 yards away or so, man, it was just like, jeez, damn.
I have to look into that now. But that's really piqued my interest about the predator thing. Like, why is that? I mean, I know it does happen, but it is significantly more rare. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, I think, predators in general are used to preying on things. And I think they know intuitively if they were just to fall down dead right there, they would be preyed on in a sense. So I think it's like maybe ego driven.
Yeah, could be.
The biggest, baddest. I'm going to go over here. You ain't going to find me where I die. But again, it's just talk shit, speculating.
Can I ask you, Fred, to quickly speculate on one thing before we start to land the show? If you, based on the experiences you've cataloged and the experience you had and what you saw, if we had a spectrum of over here, you have wild animal on the same level as a predatory bear, bears and things like that, and on this side of the spectrum, we had human being, you and me. If you had to take a guess based on all the information you have, where on that spectrum these hairy men would sit, how close do you think they would be to just a wild animal versus an intelligent humanoid creature?
I think we would be selling ourselves short in pigeonholing kind of any kind of, oh, well, I think they're, over here versus over here, because again, we don't know shit. But however, garnering all the information that the drop in a bucket I've accumulated, we would be doing a disservice to ourselves to try to view it from that point. You got to look at it's everything in one. It's capable of just brute strength, being an animal, sniffing tracks, to the level of cunning of drawing people out, imitating a baby crying. You know what? Am I making sense with that?
No, you made a lot of sense with that. I think that's a really fascinating answer, and I think you're right. I think it can be limiting to think of it in those terms. But if anything, that just makes the idea of the hairy man that much more terrifying. We're talking about a complete, evolved, efficient hunting, apex predator.
I come out into the woods a lot. I got receipts for it. I got videos all over. I'm not all of them are on the channel or anything, but I'm in the woods a lot. They got me beat hands down. I mean, 24/7. It's what they do. Yeah. I mean, so many unanswered questions, man. But yeah, I truly feel that we would be doing a disservice to ourselves to try to pigeonhole any kind of, they're this versus that versus that. I think it's a lot more than we even can wrap our minds around.
Yeah. All right, Fred. So I think we've covered a lot today, and I do appreciate your time. I think we could probably just end on that one kind of more philosophical question of, if one of our listeners finds themselves either in the woods of Alaska or in just the woods anywhere that's heavily forested, and they encounter one of these things, what advice would you have for them?
Gosh, be careful and don't go looking for them, would be my best advice. But if randomly come across, don't make eye contact, man, and do everything you can to get away. And if you have a gun, I'm biased because of my experience. I say shoot them all. So I may not be the best to give advice on that, because I'm kind of jaded and got a little get back. But yeah, get out of there quickly as possible. And a lot of people get paralleled. So, man, yeah, be careful what you wish for. Don't go looking for an encounter, because you just might get one and it might be not what you were expecting, because not everyone's getting, Patterson Gimlin footage of this thing quartering away out in the open perfectly. That's not how it goes down. Because I've talked to people with guns in their hand and cameras, and they're in such shock coming across the reality of it. The thought of using a gun, like, I felt so deflated with that 30-06, man. Not working. It just, gosh, yeah, just be careful. Try to figure out what the sounds they make are as, prerequisites to an encounter. And if you come across those, man, find a different place to hike, find a different place to be. Because at the end of the day, nationwide, 200 and some thousand people missing a year nationwide? Don't be a flyer, don't be a missing person bulletin. It's, your curiosity is not worth it. Just not.